On today's Motorhaus, we chat to Christianne Ireland, daughter of legendary racing driver Innes Ireland. Join us as we talk about the past, present and the future of motorsport in the idyllic settings of the Holme Moss hillclimb.
We're privileged today to be hanging out with one of our great friends, Christianne. How are you, darling?
I'm very well, all the better for seeing you and Ratchet.
Oh,
as
you see,
know, and your parents
the
and
nicest
Claudia.
people, the nicest people.
Yeah, but you guys, when I first met you two, and then your parents, I just thought it really doesn't get any better than this.
Oh, well,
because we can pick up where we left off, but also the motorsport family.
my dad had a mild motorsports background as a rally driver. Your dad was pretty much in the top tier of things, wasn't he, Christianne?
Well,
so not to put too fine a point on it, but...
He was in the top tier in many respects, in that he got himself very well known and he became famous. His career rose quite quickly in the late 50s, early 60s, and he got noticed because he was in the right race at the right time, in the right car.
So we are, of course, talking about Formula One champion,
Absolutely.
Innes Ireland. And of course, for me, there's a heroism associated with that because not only was he a racing driver, but a great motoring writer as well, right?
Very much so. And I mean, his Formula One career was checkered with all sorts of wonderful stories, wonderful, superb crashes. I mean, on the front of his book that he wrote about his racing career, All Arms and Elbows.
Oh, what a great title, right?
It says it all, and there's a fabulous picture on the first edition of him flying in the car at Monaco. And, you know, that was the heroism that there was in those days. But his career never really went to the top notch because he was also, because he was an engineer, he was argumentative, he was opinionated, and he told the team owners, and there weren't that many in those days, where to get off, basically. And so he ended up doing what he did, but I think his name is infamous for all sorts of reasons, and mainly because actually he was just a thoroughly nice guy.
Indeed.
Handshake meant something to him in those days.
Absolutely.
He was honourable, and he was really one of the last of the gentleman racing drivers.
And this is something we were having a quick chat about over dinner just now, is of course motorsport has changed very much now. In some respects for the better, it's a completely different world, isn't
we
it?
should
with
never
different
try,
people.
Bob, we should never try to compare it really.
No.
Because it
worlds.
was what it was then. And I think what's lovely now is that there's still enough people out there that want to keep that heritage going, and I'm one of them. I feel hugely privileged now. As a child I didn't, but now I feel hugely privileged to have had that life, that insight into his life, but also some of the other drivers that were his mates. Dad's mates would come round and there'd be Sterling sitting next to you, or Jimmy Clark, you know, and Graham.
Being taken to school in a 250 GTO.
Absolutely, or the GT40 in London.
Taken to school in a Ford GT40.
Well, it was the prototype for the road GT40. So he was test driving. I mean, he worked for Ford, he worked for Aston Martins as a sort of test pilot as well. So those were the sort of behind the scenes that he used to get involved with, because he was an engineer. He started at Rolls-Royce, he worked on Spitfire engines. Until he nearly blew up the Glasgow factory. And then they sent him down to London, and he lived on this is so sexy, he lived on a motor torpedo boat in Chelsea Wharf in the 50s.
Of course he did.
Driving a 3-litre racing Bentley to work at Rolls-Royce every day.
It's about history, and that's why we're here today.
It's why we're here today.
It's why we're here to celebrate what is one of the oldest, if not one of the founding places of where motorsport began. And how are you enjoying the day?
Oh, it's unbelievable. I mean, as always, Guy and his entourage pull off a fabulous, laid-back, chilled, but a proper petrol head day, because
it really
it's all about taking your time, doing what you want to do in your own time. The hill is challenging.
Oh yes.
As I know, as I went up with you, in Marlena. I love that name, Darling.
Christianne and Marlene, they get on so well,
I love
darling.
that car, but you know, it's challenging, that hill. And you know, you think in the early 1900s when this was started, in some of the cars, of which there's been one today, I would have said.
Some of them without even four-wheel brakes.
Exactly.
It's just...
It's mind-blowing.
The bravery.
Yes, and I mean, you know, the fun, and they started off this wonderful history that we're living with today, and people like Guy and people who follow those kind of things like us and all of our friends who turn up religiously because they know for their £5–10 they get a bloody good, I'm allowed to say that.
Oh yeah, you can absolutely. We're PG-13, Christianne, so yeah, absolutely.
A bloody good day, and you go away thinking, I've been part of something special. And it's passing that history on to the next generation. Yeah. So if there are people lined up in the village who are much younger, who are interested in the cars, I heard Stephen saying there was somebody who came and said, but I know nothing about cars. He spent time talking to her. It's about that, because otherwise, you know, it's like any history, we've got to keep it going.
It's important, isn't it? And something that I feel really strongly about is locking the cars away in private collections, hardly ever bringing them out. That doesn't allow people to build a connection to them, and it doesn't allow people to build a connection to the history of what they're all about. Whereas here, special events like this, when you see the cars that are alive, and you see them almost literally breathing fire and fury, certainly in the case of one of the aero engine monsters that were here, I think even a child will find something relatable with that, because it's the drama and the spectacle, isn't it?
And I think the other thing is, you know, we could so easily lose, and we already have lost so much of our engineering heritage in this country. Now, if you look back to the Victorian era, my goodness, we were so way ahead of everybody else. And in a way, if youngsters come and see these cars, mechanical, especially the aero engines, working, it's fascinating. And you only need a little penny to drop in that child's mind, and you know, who knows, they maybe are our Formula One mechanics of the future, but we need to keep that going, because you know, it's raw, it's real. And you know, in this day and age, and I'm a techie phobe really at times, I'm a dinosaur.
We've got the analogue and digital here on the tail,
definitely. I understand we need all of that, but I think we all need to reconnect with the real. And I think the cars that we've seen today, and with the new cars that have come today, there's a place for everything, and we need to keep that.
We're all standing on the shoulders of giants in society. We all are. But to understand your place in that, you have to know what's come before. You have to have an appreciation for that. So events like today are absolutely magical.
Oh, this is just blissful. I mean, it's my second year. I loved it last year because it was the first year, but this year there's a different atmosphere. It's as good as. Because the same people are back here, but there's also another load of different people who've turned up that I've not seen before. And having this paddock at the back of the fleece really lends itself, and the cars that were lined up here earlier, the quality, and you know, people have driven some miles in this heat. You know, they're enthusiasts.
And in older cars. It's a challenge for an old car on a day like today, but here they are.
And here they are just doing it, having fun. They'll go home and they'll feel good. You know, it's making memories as well.
It is indeed. So, same time next year?
Most definitely, and hopefully next year I might have 4 wheels to drive in up the hill.
Well,
whereas actually this year I've had no wheels to drive up the hill.
That's outrageous, Christianne. We will sort that out for next year. In the meantime, let's go and head over to the hill. We have a Patreon now.
We do!
If you'd like to directly support us by taking out a Patreon account, we have multiple tiers depending on what kind of rewards you'd like. Please have a look in the description, nip over to Patreon, and if you value what we do, your contribution makes what we do possible.